Alright, in this video I'll continue doing some problems using the AC method. We're factoring trinomials. But you'll notice something different on these last four. Now, if you think back, we've learned three techniques for factoring. The first was factoring out a greatest common factor. And then that led into factoring by grouping. When we factor by grouping, we factor out a GCF. We do it twice. And then when we do the AC method, which we learned in the first video here, with three terms, we end up breaking it into four, and we use factoring by grouping since we have four terms. And so our techniques build. But the other thing is, keep in mind, we have three different ways to factor now. And in this case, you can see that something's not right because this should be 3x squared. With the trinomials we've been factoring, these have all been squared and we've had a constant here. So that should be your first clue that something's different. And in fact, can't we factor out a GCF of x? So in all of these, you're going to need to factor out a GCF first. Now it's possible to factor these without factoring out the GCF first, but it tends to make things more difficult, and often students forget to factor out the GCF at the end. So in general, we always would say factor out a GCF first if possible. So here I can factor out an x. It'll be x times 3x squared minus 5x minus 2. So I've factored out an x, but look at what's inside here. This is a trinomial like what we've just been working with. And so I'm going to use the AC method on this part in here. I need two numbers that multiply to AC, which would be 3 times negative 2. That's negative 6, that add up to negative 5. Be careful, sometimes people make a mistake on this one. Those are your only factors of 6, 1 times 6 or 2 times 3. Again, since we have a negative here, these have opposite signs. Since they add to a negative, I want the bigger numbers to be negative. So be careful, we want the one that adds up to negative 5. That's 1 plus negative 6. Again, we always want to make sure we double check our numbers before we plug them in. Notice 1 times negative 6 is negative 6. And 1 plus negative 6 is negative 5. And so we're good. We can go ahead and split our b term. We have 3x squared plus x minus 6x minus 2. So now we'll factor by grouping. We can factor out an x. It'll be x times 3x plus 1. So when I factor here, I'm expecting a 3x plus 1. And notice 3x times something gives me this minus 6x. I'm going to need a minus 2 there. Negative 2 times 3x is negative 6x. Negative 2 times 1 is the negative 2. So we have two terms with a common factor of 3x plus 1. If we cancel those out, notice we have x minus 2 left over. But don't forget, there's one more thing. We had factored out an x. And so in our final answer, we'll have that x out front. So how would you check yourself here? Well, you would first want to FOIL these two binomials, and you would get to here. And then you would distribute the x, and you get back to where we started. All right. So if you think you've got it, you might try number 11, or you can watch me do another one and maybe try the last two. In fact, you could do all three of the remaining problems if you understand what we just did. Okay, so let's see. 6 times 16, that's a pretty big number. I'd rather not work with that, and in fact, aren't these all even numbers? And in fact, 2 is the GCF. We can factor out a 2. 2 times 3x squared gives us the 6x squared. 2 times a minus 10x will give us the minus 20x. And 2 times 8 will give us the 16. So again, we're going to now use the AC method to factor this part here. So far all we've done is factor out a GCF of 2. So I need two numbers that multiply to 3 times 8, which is my AC, that's 24, and add up to -10. Now again, I've been going through all the possibilities, but if you see the numbers that work, then go with it. So see if you can figure that out just by looking at it. It's going to be 4 and 6, and they're going to both be negative. Let's see. Let's go through it step by step. So I'm going to write out the factors of 24. 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6. There's a bunch. And these numbers multiply to 24, which is a positive number, so they're both positive or they're both negative. Well, since they add to a negative, they must both be negative. So let's make all our numbers negative. And the ones that add up to -10 would be the -4 and -6. And so we're going to break this down into 3x squared minus 4x minus 6x plus 8. And we can factor out an x here. We get x times 3x minus 4. On the second two terms, we're expecting to get a 3x minus 4 when we factor. 3x times a minus 2 would give us the minus 6x. Notice -2 times -4 does give us 8. And so we're good. So we have two terms with a common factor of 3x minus 4. If you cross those off, you can see you're left with x minus 2 as your other factor. And once again, don't forget, we still need to bring that 2 down, because in the beginning we had factored out a 2. All right, let's go on to 12 and 13. Again, I hope you feel confident enough to try them first and then watch the video and just check yourself. Okay, so for 15, 39, and 18, it looks like 3 is going to be our GCF times 5x plus 5x squared plus 13x minus 6. So again, we've got a trinomial inside. Let's go ahead and factor that. So 5 times -6 is -30. Make sure you've got a -30 there, and 13. So I need two numbers that multiply to -30 and add up to 13. 2 and 15 are the ones that are going to work. But again, let's go through this systematically. We have 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10, and 5 times 6. Those are all the possible factors of 30. Since they multiply to a negative, one's positive and one's negative. Since they add to a positive, let's make the smaller ones negative. And so you can see that the 2 and the 15 are the ones that work. Students will often use a -3 and 10 here, but do you see why those are wrong? Those do not add up to 13. So -2 times 5 is -30. I'm sorry, -2 times 15 is -30. -2 plus 15 is 13. And so let's go ahead and split our b term. We get 5x squared minus 2x plus 15x, and then minus 6. We can factor out an x here. We get x times 5x minus 2. So we expect a 5x minus 2 here. And 3 times 5x would give me the 15, so I need a plus 3 here. And if you multiply 3 times the minus 2, that does give you the -6. So it looks like we're good. Again, you could distribute here, you should get that. Distribute here, you should get that. If you wanted to check yourself, our common factor is 5x minus 2. And when you cross out those factors, you can see the other factor is going to be x plus 3. Don't forget, got to bring that 3 down. That's part of my answer. So again, if I wanted to check it, I could FOIL these together, and I would get to this step, and then I would distribute the 3, and I'd be back to where I started. All right, last one. All right, notice 8, 20, and 12. They are divisible by 2, but there's an even bigger factor. How about 4? But also n, isn't n a common factor? In fact, just seeing this n cubed would make me realize I need to pull out a factor of n. So 4n is my GCF. It'll be times 2n squared minus 5n plus 3. Looks good. So again, we're going to factor this portion in here. Our AC is going to be 6, and our B is negative 5. So factors of 6 that add to negative 5. Now this is similar to what we did up here, but you'll notice we get different answers. Notice because these numbers multiply to a positive 6, they're both negative, since they add up to a negative here. Now if this had been positive, these would all be positive. So they multiply to positive 6, they're both positive or both negative. Since this term is negative, or since our B term is negative, they've got to both be negative in order to add up to a negative. And so notice negative 2 plus negative 3 gives you the negative 5. Oh, excuse me. These are the numbers that multiply to 6 and add to negative 5, so we're good. We can go ahead and split our B term. It'll become minus 2n minus 3n plus 3. And so let's factor out a 2n from the first two terms. 2n times n will give us the 2n squared and a minus 1 here. So when I factor here, I'm expecting an n minus 1. So again, we're just factoring out the GCF, but we notice we have a minus 3n here, so I need a negative 3. Negative 3 times n will give me that, and negative 3 times negative 1 will give me 3. So notice here we have a common factor of n minus 1. We cross that out, you can see the leftover part tells me my other factor is 2n minus 3. Last, let's make sure we bring down that 4n, and that's our final answer. And that's going to be the end of this video.